That would be the one.
Good afternoon, good evening, buenos dias, wherever you are on this fast forward planet, still wrapped in a pandemic. There's still several billion people with a B who have not been vaccinated even once. I think I have my second booster, so I've been vaccinated 4 times. I'm a privileged, gifted person. It's an overheating planet. It's a planet riven by conflict right now, thanks to Vladimir Putin, who has basically ignored all what were thought of as the rules of engagement and diplomacy. And it's a planet with lingering mysteries that I feel need to be addressed anew. One of them involves a climate scientist who I never met in my nearly 4 decades on the climate beat. And his name is Vladimir Aleksandrov. You can see him here in the early 80s with a couple of colleagues, and you'll learn more about a lot more about him in a minute. My main guest today is Nikolai Golitsyn, who's a British filmmaker with Russian roots, who's been on the trail of what happened to this man, Vladimir Aleksandrov, which was March 31st, 1985, in Spain, who vanished. This is after a very high-profile last few years, where he became one of the leading spokespeople, along with Carl Sagan and others, for the concept of nuclear winter, that not only would a nuclear war be calamitous, but the atmospheric consequences could be horrific and long-lasting as well. And that's gotten new resonance because of Vladimir Putin and his nuclear saber-rattling around his atrocious invasion of Ukraine. Also here is Mickey Glantz, who was a social scientist for many, many, many decades, all the way back through the 70s, maybe even the 60s. I don't want to... who I met at the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado, in the Flatiron area there, who had met with this man named Vladimir. Oh, and we just lost Nikolai for a second. I'm sure he'll come back. So maybe we'll start with the early days. Mickey, just explain a little bit who you are and your roots in climate impact science, I would say, kind of the climate-human relationship. And then how did you first meet Vladimir?
Well, I was actually, I do go back to the 60s, but not with climate. I was doing wars of national liberation and focused on Africa, and went to a few of the Portuguese colonies in the decolonization era. But I got tired of people versus people. And then in the early 70s, there were stories appearing about droughts and floods and things like that. And I thought I'd shift away from people killing people to people fighting nature, climate specifically. And as it turned out, I found that people use climate to kill people by not feeding them during droughts and things like that, as happened in Ethiopia. But then I embarked on climate society environment relationship in the early 70s, and have continued since, now focused on disaster risk reduction. But I was a postdoc at NCAR when I was shifting from revolutions to nature and climate. And I went to NCAR as a postdoc in 74. And it was about 78 that I met these 2 Russians that were visiting NCAR. One was Alexandrov, and another was Vladimir Sergin.
Right, little Vladimir, he was known as.
Vladimir was, and rightly so, was Alexandrov. And so that was pretty interesting. And
but tell us, before you go forward, remind people of the political context at the time. Ronald Reagan, Cold War.
Ronald Reagan wasn't president yet. It was Jimmy Carter.
So this was like...
Yeah, see, I'm old.
Oh, this is still the 70s. Okay.
Yeah. No, it was 78 that I believe he first appeared at NCAR with Vladimir Revkin. And while we weren't in the same areas, I was doing social impacts and he's doing his atmospheric research. I had already started in the mid-70s going to the Soviet Union, focused on deserts. And of course, to go to Central Asia, you had to go through Moscow. I mean, so I've been to Moscow 50 times in retrospect, but not all of it there. So I was interested in these two Russians. They were rare to see in America. That's probably Americans were rare over there. And so I chatted with them in my rudimentary Russian and just as people, friends, whatever. But I did hear stuff then. And it was later in 85 or 84, I had a longer interaction with him. But I had seen him, he was friendly. There were rumors, who is he? Why are the Russians here? How did he get out with his wife? That kind of thing. At a time when the Cold War was at pretty much its height, or reaching its height. And so there was a lot of speculation he was there to steal information and all that stuff.
Early days of supercomputing.
Yeah, but according to people I know and that were at NCAR, they said he really never had direct contact with the machine. But he was given two programmers who did all of his card punching and things like that in the card punching days.
Right.
So I don't. I didn't see him as a spy, and my feeling was, okay, he was observant when he was here. When I went to Russia, to be honest, I was met by CIA, and they asked me, "Oh, while you're over there, if you happen to see a computer, well, what's the name? What's the power? What's this, that, and the other?" I said, if the Russians see me looking at a computer, they'll know I'm spying because I do social science. I'm not a computer jockey. So I rejected that. And so that's the way it was in those days. If you were going the other place, someone was going to tell you to look for something. I don't believe any of the rumors about him. Maybe he was picking up some information, but he was working on the atmosphere then, and that was in the pre-nuclear winter days. It was before they got onto the more hot button issue of nuclear winter in the early 80s, mid 80s.
And he did like American culture in Colorado, and when he was at Oregon State University for a while, supposedly he even ended up with an Oregon driver's license.
Yes.
He liked it here.
Yes, but on that, I know that's pointed out in some places, several articles. So he got into the American culture, which led to some of this. Well, maybe he's defecting and all that. But over the years, I had contact with lots of Russian high-ranking scientists from the academy, academicians, and they would often pass them off to me to fill time. But I loved it, and so they got to go to yard sales and things like that. And they were human. They wanted to buy something different for their wife, something. So they get into the culture, but they weren't becoming Americans and we weren't becoming Russians, but we loved the interaction and the sharing. So my feeling is that he was just, in that regard, being quite human.
Absolutely. So Nikolai, we got you back here. Tell us a little bit about for those who aren't familiar with what you're up to. Tell us what you're up to.
Right. Well, I mean, so was it about 3 years I contacted you 3 years ago? Yeah. After having, I was actually doing some research. I was doing an adaptation of a book called Ice by Anna Kavan, which is a science fiction book written in 1968, which postulates the world is set in an ice age, in a future ice age. The book itself is very incredible, and I'd read it and I was like, my God, I really wanted to make an adaptation of it. I had access to the rights, and then I was like, wait a second, we've got global warming. I need to put some science behind this because, I can't be going around doing a science fiction film about the new ice age because it just doesn't make any sense anymore. So I kind of was like, okay, I'm going to do some digging. I'm going to make sure that this book can be made. And then I came across Nuclear Winter. As I'm going through Nuclear Winter, I'm like, okay, this sounds like this sounds plausible. Having never heard of it before. And then I came across your article. And to be honest,
the Nuclear Winter story.
There we go. Yeah. And then Then I read your article about Vladimir, and it really, really touched me. What came across in your writing and what came across in the story was somebody who was really popular, who was really and Mickey, this is interesting because you met him and stuff. I'm really curious because this is what sort of came across to me was somebody who was just very gregarious, somebody who was quite funny, somebody who's just very sincere and straightforward, very passionate about what they were doing. And I think the thing that really came across to me was somebody who spent the last 3 days of his life in drunk in a bar, only to just vanish. And it very much reminded me of Under the Volcano by Malcolm Lowry from 1948, that sort of seminal book about the last 12 hours of a British consul's life. And there was something very painful I felt about it. And I was like, I want to know more. And it sort of set me off on a journey where it's now sort of, I'm 100 interviews deep. I was just hosted in December by Olga Alexandrova. There, actually, what you're seeing there is that Olga opened up her archives, her family archives, to me, and I got to be able, and so I got to see. I've now got to see every stage of his life. Everything was photographed by all the members of the family. It's absolutely amazing. It's just a document of Soviet life. It's very, very exciting. Anyway, I spent a month in Moscow just before this war broke out, and Olga was just the most wonderful host, and I felt like I'd met a sister. I think that we've kind of worked out that I think that I'm related distantly to Alia, Vladimir's wife. And anyway, I went out and I met colleagues of Vladimir in Moscow, and got to meet sort of friends and family, and got to absorb the daily life. I was staying in his room, in his bed, sitting at his desk, looking out of his window, typing away, and it's very, very surreal, and very touching, very, very touching. There's many theories, but it's I'm sure I'm doing the right thing. I mean, now I've gone to Cordoba. Here I am. I've been flyering the streets. I set up a Spanish hotline to see if I could get roust up any rumors or ideas. I'm also now doing that in Madrid, and then I'm going to be laying a wreath for him at the end of the week.
Interesting.
And and then I'm meeting human rights lawyers here, and I'm meeting lots of other journalists and potential and eyewitnesses. So we will see what happens. But it's all consuming. I'm afraid, just reading your article 3 years ago, it sort of set me off on a trail that every penny I've been earning has been going into this, and we'll see what happens. I mean, I've met with new producers now, and let's see. I mean, I think, apart from the fact it will make a very sad but very beautiful film. I think it also it's very important because it's funny. Mickey, I mean, I don't know how much because I just got cut off, and I apologize because the computer crashed. But did you say you worked? Did you work in the Karakum Desert?
Yes, yeah, that was in mostly Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan.
Was that with Kirill Kondratyev?
Yes, I knew Kirill. Yes.
Right. This is very interesting.
It's very weird. Well, people were nice to me, and as a social scientist, I wasn't a threat to anyone. See?
What does that say?
Well,
what were you doing? What was your thing?
I'll tell you in a sec, but it's also true in NCAR, where you have many physical scientists. The atmospheric scientists have been very, very nice to me throughout my career because I wasn't challenging their theories. I was helping them expose the utility of their work. And so some of the people like Reed Bryson, who was considered to be a tough person to deal with, took me under his wing. He was nice to me, you know, while he would confront someone, not me. But anyway, in the CARICOM, I worked, I got invited by the UN Environment Program, which had the Soviet Union paid dues in rubles. And so the rubles would be used in the Soviet Union. And then they had to have 1/4 of the lecturers had to be from the West, that kind of thing. There were some limitations. And as they kept reducing that from 8 to 4 to 2 to 1, I survived and I was the one. That's why there were so many trips into the almost all of the Central Asian republics, but mostly Ashgabat, mostly Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan. And then the third was Kazakhstan. And it was about land use in arid areas, and desertification was a hot topic at the time, which has kind of fallen back now, but it's one of the big issues of the day, especially in Africa and other desert-prone countries.
There's a comment that came in, by the way, from Andre Lapinas. He says, "Hey, Mickey, I visited you in 1989, WGV."
Do I still look the same? Ask him. Yes, long time. Yeah, I mean, I really like, I don't know what to say. It's an odd time now because the two major countries I've worked in are China and Russia of late. And I don't have access to either right now. So it's quite difficult to go there. But my time with the atmospheric scientists, I mean, I met them in Israel, all of the top people I met, and they were all quite nice to me. And when I met Alexandrov, if I should say this now, I actually was on an Aeroflot flight in the old days, the old Aeroflot planes, which were pretty Spartan, you know, and no media, nothing. And sometimes the light didn't work where you sat and things like that. So anyway, sitting with my wife coming back from one of my trips to Central Asia and to Moscow, and coming down the aisle was Vladimir, and voila, he sat next to me. That was the open seat. And so we were buddies for the next gazillion hours and a long, slow flight back to America. And he was took out some papers and was starting to edit some English stuff that someone had done, or he had done, or he had translated, or whatever. And I said, oh, you know, we chatted a bit about, I don't remember. And I said, can I help? It was a long flight, nothing to do. And he said, sure. So he gave me the paper and I started reading it. And I'm always with a red pen, you know, which has gotten me in trouble in some countries, by the way. And so I started just doing it. I went into my zone and I'm, not the, and blah, blah. And my wife, after half hour, some odd minutes, pulled me to the side and, hey, what are you doing? He didn't ask you to rewrite the paper. He just asked you to change some more, you know. And so I said, hey, is this okay? Is this, no, keep going. So I did. And at the end, he wrote on the bottom of the draft that acknowledging that I had edited his paper on a flight over Greenland. That was where I had put all that time in. It was kind of nice. He was a nice guy. I mean, I know they say drank a lot. That's what they said. He was gregarious. He was outgoing. I never saw him drunk, you know, but I've seen other Russians drink and never get drunk. I mean, so it's partly cultural. He was just great. I mean, there was nothing negative I could say about him, you know, and I don't think he was, I mean, he may have gotten special deals to come out of the country with his wife and all that, you know, and they may have thought something for me going into Russia why'd they let me in? When the Soviet Union broke up, one of my colleagues in Russia went to see my file. I asked him to look at my file because at that open period, And he said my file was about that thick, about, an inch or 2.5 inches thick. I wanted to get it to see why they thought I was doing whatever I was doing when I was there. But then they closed down the free access. So that was pretty interesting. And he also found, my friend, that in Turkmenistan, my file was double the thickness because they had less to do. Whoever, they followed me everywhere, but in Moscow they followed me intermittently. And then it's just the way the system over there was. So I assumed they were looking around, and that's the way it was. But I didn't see anything nefarious. I was in the technical end. So
I have a question for you.
One reaffirmed to me today by another guy who did know him, that he knew him in the late 70s, who said that did not have access to the code for the Cray, and that he was assigned to guys as programmers. Okay.
So he did not. Yeah, that's what I think Dan Anderson at NCAR told me that for my story back in 1986.
Right. And Bob, yeah.
I mean, some of the theories that were put forward were pretty silly. There were actually within the U.S. establishment, there was some idea that he was running bomb codes, like actually working on stuff while he was there, which never really felt plausible. It feels like that same kind of low grade intelligence you were describing the CIA was suggesting.
He was, one thing that everyone noticed was that because in those days, even Xerox copy machines were centrally located. It wasn't like you had it at your desk. Most of the people, they had one big one. And he copied a lot of stuff. He was always at they'd say, oh, I have to wait for him to finish that or this, but there's nothing secret. He was there, and he was Xeroxing you. It wasn't 2 a.m. Because you sign in those days. So,
Nikolai, feel free to ask more questions too.
Well, I mean, the thing is, this is quite a fortuitous meeting because, Mickey, I'd love to know more about Kirill Kondratyev and the Karakum Desert, because both of those things have came across my desk about a month ago. And let me tell you why. So one of my threads is that I've been digging into is the nuclear winter story. And there was a claim by a Soviet defector in 2006. A book was published called Comrade J, co-written by Pete Early, who I believe is a journalist with the Washington Post, or was. This was the autobiography. It was actually Pete Early, when he recorded over hundreds of hours of interview with Sergei Trechikov, who was stationed in New York and who defected. There's a chapter in Comrade J in which Trechikov states very clearly that nuclear winter was actually the jewel in the crown of the KGB's active measure, the Aktivny Meropryatny campaign, and that it stemmed from Kirill Kondratyev and his experiments in the Karakum Desert. So I've been going around hunting about, now this was very interesting, because what has happened is that I read an amazing book by Naomi Reskes and Eric Conway called The Merchants of Doubt, which opened up the theory was about climate denial and connected that with nuclear winter. This claim by Trechikov actually opened up a thread where people started to use nuclear winter as a hoax, and the whole thing was a fake. I had to follow this because I was like, well, maybe this has something to do with Vladimir's disappearance. And we have Dr. Leon Gouret's polemic against the nuclear winter in front of us. Leon Gore was a very interesting character. And yeah, when you start to put the dates and things together, it's very interesting because the climate denial community have sort of jumped on the nuclear winter as a hoax. It's been used as a lot of the scientists involved, not just Vladimir, Brian Toon, Alan Robock, a lot of other people who are very eminent scientists who have also shown that nuclear winter is real, that they've been able to rerun all the programs today with the new computers. And yes, if you do have a limited strike in Pakistan or India, yes, it's going to affect the environment. So the question is what's going on with this nuclear winter thing? And yeah, so this is the context. So I was going to tell me about Kirill Kondratyev, because how did his name come into this?
Well, first of all, I can't. I gave 80 boxes of my papers and things, just a lot of things, to the University of Colorado to organize. So they have my letters, and I used to correspond with Kirill, and he signed books for me and stuff like that he had done that were put into English. You mentioned Kondratyev. At the time, there were a cluster of Russian, Soviet atmospheric scientists. The names are slipping my mind, but Kondratyev was one of the top ones at the time. And you mentioned his interest in the dust in Central Asia, the characterism, and that's I don't have the book, so I can't go back to it. I don't know. Several are still boxed in my garage, which I'll give to you when I find them. But at that same time, in the mid 70s, if that's where you're taking this, not maybe earlier, but in the 70s,
77, 78. I think.
Yeah, okay, that follows actually earlier studies on dust that were done by the Sahara, on the Saharan desert, because they were looking at this. Why was this 5-year drought taking place in the Sahara region, circum-Sahara, the West African Sahel drought, which I did a lot of work on. And I came across these studies, say by Jules Charny. The more dust you put in the atmosphere, what it does is it depresses rainfall and stuff like that, blocks sunlight. And then they got into the Saharan dust going over to the Caribbean and killing coral and stuff like that. And that was all around the same time. These focus on dust. So Kirill's was that. And Charny took it to, now we're in this downward trend. It's going to just keep drying out because the deserts were literally looked like they were moving. Okay, while people were actually destroying stuff on the edge of the deserts, and it just made it easier for deserts to move. So it's interesting, if Kirill was doing that, it may have been sparked by people he knew. I'm sure he knew Jules Charny, famous guy, Agarinsky at Princeton, and these places started looking at the dust issue. Just interesting. Yeah, so that might be the Kirill link. But
did you
that? If you see it as a stepping stone to, well, if you put a little dust in the atmosphere and you can change climate for a while, but they knew volcanoes could do that anyway, for years, a year or two or whatever, depending on the size of the eruption. It wasn't too far to go to say, well, if you do nuclear winter and you throw a lot of stuff in the atmosphere, you could kill humanity, is what they were saying.
Yeah, I mean, what's very fascinating about this is, I mean, I've basically been going. I think I've almost debunked Tretyakhov's claim, because I've spoken to an expert on active measures in Berlin who says that there was, because Tretyakov actually mentions a female member of the KGB First Directorate, and there doesn't seem to have been somebody working in the nuclear winter or anywhere near active measures who was a female. But then there's also, I've been corresponding with Henning Rode. I don't know if you ever come across him. He's at the Swedish Academy of Sciences. He was invited by Jeannie Peterson, who was working for Ambio magazine, to actually set the scientific tasks, because in 1981, Jeannie Peterson at Ambio actually decided to do a whole magazine on the effects of nuclear war on the planet, and so she, of one of the many, there were many different chapters, and one of the chapters she approached Paul Crutzen in Mainz, Germany, and then Paul, she said, would you do a piece on the effects of nuclear war on the environment? And he said, that would be lovely. And then he contacted John Burks over at in Colorado. Mm-hmm. And so John and Paul wrote this thing, and they were doing all the paperwork, and I've spoken to John about it, and he's amazing. He sent me all of the paperwork between him and Sweden and Paul, and they were like, they suddenly realized, they were like, oh my God, if there were all these fires and everything, well, it's all going to block out. Well, what was fascinating is that supposedly Tretyakov is claiming that there was actually KGB interference in the Ambio article, but it just doesn't make any sense. So the big question is was he lying? And if he was lying, what does this mean? It's opened up a whole new very big question mark as to what on earth is going on and what on earth is true anymore. This story just opens up one riddle next, onwards to the next riddle. And onwards.
But at the same time, what really bugs me, just after all these decades, is just the basic reality that a climate scientist disappeared, and there's no explanation for it other than he's dead. And when you look at on the ground in Spain, as you had, and we did in 1986, the odds of a body not turning up, if it was either suicide or robbery, are low. Ergo, he was killed. And this is just laying dormant all these decades. Just in February, Oleg Anisimov, the head of the Russian delegation at the IPCC meeting, in their private Zoom, apologized for Russia's behavior in Ukraine, and a member of the Duma publicly said he should be disappeared. So these issues, the integrity of science, to me, should include the safety of scientists, and for these intelligence agencies and our governments to just sit on this case for these decades feels absurd. There's only so much that I or you as journalists or a filmmaker can do without some impetus, and even the scientific community, the International Science Council, or is there a reason everyone's happy to let this one just sort of lay idle? While Olga sits there in Moscow, his daughter.
I mean, this is it. She has no closure. She actually was unable to, I think, sell a house because she has no documents to prove that her father is dead. It's still top secret in Russia. It's still top secret in the US. Mm-hmm. Nobody will respond to me in the UK, France, or in Spain. A Spanish lawyer that I've just been speaking to a few months ago, he said, well, Spanish government actually have broken 4 points of human rights. We can actually go after them because they never followed it up. It reminds me very much of Jamal Khashoggi, the journalist who was taken into the embassy and killed in Istanbul. There's been an outcry. Supposedly, some people were executed in Saudi Arabia very quickly. First of all, they were executed. Was there a jury? We don't know what happened. That whole thing's gone very quiet. But again, it's a very similar thing. And as a scientist should not be. I mean, it doesn't matter whether it's 36 years ago. It's just Vladimir just got left behind. And I don't think it's fair. I really don't think it's fair. And I don't think it's right. And, and also everyone loves him. Every single person I've met, no one has had a bad word to say. Everyone's like, he's really funny. He's a great cook. He was a wonderful dad. He was a wonderful father, husband, and friend. Did he get drunk? He got drunk sometimes, but from all my understandings, he was, his wife was dying, and that was his sweetheart.
Right.
And he got very bad news the week before he left for Madrid, and it's tragic, really, really tragic. So yeah, I'm going to keep going to the end on this one.
Well, I'm really glad you picked up on this. I did. As journalists, we're kind of like sharks. We keep moving forward, and stories come and go, and we feed on them, and then we go on to the next one. Obviously, I've stuck on the climate story for a long time, but his story, I sort of poked at it, and the Retro Report did a short video on it, but I've never really pushed back. I don't know, Mickey. Maybe on the humanity of the guy, if there are more reflections you had based on your time, either on airplanes or in Boulder, any other nuggets that come to mind?
No, I have more to say about the setting.
Sure.
Michael Budico is the name I was struggling to remember. He was the top guy, and the Soviet Union at the time, the sort of joke, at least in my mind, there was a joke, and while the Americans had the cray, the Russians had shovels, and they were going to look at stratified soils and, looking at other indicators of climate change. And Budico was not in the forefront of the humans can influence the climate. Okay. And back in 2003, the Russians held a conference on climate change. I don't know if it wasn't the World Climate Conference, but it was a Russian World Congress on climate. And I actually have a small video clip of none other than Putin who addressed this.
Oh, I want to see that.
And the tone of it was climate change. People aren't influencing the climate. Even Yuri Israel, who had been the head of the Met Service, was there. It was kind of moving. It wasn't that Putin in 1985, wherever he was KGBing, in Germany or something, East Germany, whatever, saying the climate, it's a imperial plot or something. But this meeting was important enough. And you could look at the dais who was there. It was high level stuff, and it was more or less not pro humans can influence the climate. It was more like a bump in the road towards making the case. And that's 2003.
Yeah.
So that's all going on, but that's late already. I mean, in the mid 80s. I mean, I was involved in a lot of stuff, but I was more like the fly on the wall, but a social science fly. I heard the debates and I heard this other stuff, and I was really, really close with Steve Schneider. When he was at NCAR before he went off to Stanford, we were, just really very close. We weren't, and he liked social stuff, and he helped me learn some of the science and all that kind of stuff. But this was a hot button issue, and Sagan was important, and it got a lot of play. I think the only way this thing ever gets resolved, unless, Nikolai, you find that golden ring, is if the Russians, the US, and the Spanish get together. Because, and they just say, look, let's solve this. It's solvable. And my personal view is that while Cordoba had a communist mayor, Spain was anti-communist. And I had mentioned in a note to you guys that one time when I was giving lectures in the Soviet desert, Soviet Union then, in 1980 to 91, actually, I was doing it. They give pins everywhere. It's like a collectible thing, a thing to do. Collect a pin from that city, this city, that's it. And all of the students were middle, somewhere between 25 and 50. And they had these pins that they were collecting in every place we went, every town, everywhere, wherever. And at the end, when we were leaving and all that, and I said, "Hey, do you guys need any pins? Because I've got extra ones and stuff like that." I was one of the lecturers to these guys, and the oldest of the two Spanish guys who were participants said, "No, I want to give you my pins." I said, "Why? It's a great souvenir, blah blah blah." And he said, "If I wear a Soviet pin in Spain when I go home, they will kill me." So that led me to believe that what could have happened, given all the I mean, no evidence, is that he was having conversations in a bar. He was a Russian, and they, had some drinks, and he got killed, not for money, not for things, but it was a hate crime. That's what it was. That's my view. So it's not in Spain's interest to solve it. He's not in the U.S. As in a witness protection program. The Russians have no reason to stick him in a gulag because he was high visibility, and there aren't too many reasons to happen with a purpose. It was in a happenstance. Anyway, that's glance.
All the more reason theoretically for countries then to, well, except maybe for Spain, to sort of reveal that. But maybe in the end, he becomes just one of these characters who sadly got chewed up by a system and will flow on. I am eager to work with Nikolai to keep this film project moving forward, because I just think that reality and the truth matters. Hopefully we can help drive a little bit of the conversation towards some kind of outcome.
It reminds me of a book. Sorry to interrupt, but I'm old, so I forget what I'm going to say. It reminds me of a book, and this may be what you're doing, Nikolai, and that is the Cuban Missile Crisis. There are three players: the U.S., the Soviet Union, and Cuba. Okay, and that's what Graham Allison did. He looked at the perspectives of the different, who had something to gain, who had something to lose, kind of lost thing. And this is a bit like that. You could three players again, one mystery, and it could be solved, but it might not. It's just it can be solved. I think there is an answer. Okay, by not checking off what it is, but getting rid of all the things that are.
That is, you've hit the nail on the head. Is that, I mean, having spoken to now 7 members of the American intelligence community, and spoken to somebody in the French intelligence community and in Spanish, I have actually had a confirmation that one of them knows. He actually said to me, "Oh, that story, yes, that's a very good story. Keep going, but I'm afraid I can't help you." And I'm like, come on, can you just whisper it in my ear? I promise I won't, because at least if I could tell Olga something, that would mean a lot to me. But yeah, you're right. It's by actually ticking off what didn't happen, it actually shows a sort of negative pattern that's starting to hone in, and it's becoming quite clear now. Especially when speaking, for example, I did actually speak to the ex-head of the defector relocation program for the CIA, who was Joe Augustin, who was really, really cool guy, and we just walked through it, and he was like, "Well, this is how we do it, and we wouldn't do it like that. It would be a complete mess, and he would have been here, and this wouldn't have happened, and that wouldn't have happened." And just by actually showing me how they would normally do it, and and he gave me examples of things that they had done in the past, he was able to just go, "It just doesn't make any sense that he's in America. I can't officially tell you that. He couldn't officially tell me things, but he could officially tell me, well, this is kind of like operational process, and that doesn't make any sense." So it's like by going around to all these different people, you're right, a pattern is forming.
Like an artichoke, you want to get to the heart of it, and so you pluck off the leaves until you get down to, hopefully the heart. So
Well, I
This,
do think it's valuable that you've gone back to Spain, and the flyers that you're putting out. If there's a way to jog the memory of some retiree or talk to the police at the time,
who knows?
yeah,
You know, I mean,
someone and
that's it. You know,
I got to
they are
show.
analog style.
I'm showing here Nikolai, who has a background in visual effects in movies. There's an app called My Heritage, and he recently made Alexandrov come to life to a certain extent. And maybe this can jog someone's memory too. This is a still photograph that's just manipulated enough so you capture a sense of the person. It's a little haunting, but anything that can prod somebody a little bit to think back to March 31st or so, 1985, and those towns. It would be good to try to do that. Well, I'm hoping that this conversation takes things just a little bit further. I'm really glad that you both could come on today, especially from Spain. And always, Mickey, it's great to catch up with you on so many things. Climate vulnerability, hiding behind climate change. There's more we need to talk about on that front too. If there's any last thought you have before we'll cut this short momentarily. Mickey, is there someone else we should talk to who was closer to him through those days when you were intersecting? That'd be good to know. And Nikolai, maybe you get the final word here on what you hope to come up with in coming months. But Mickey first.
I'm very interested in helping. If there's any way I could help, I can try and look at my own notes. I'm sure I have stuff from Alexandrov somewhere, and Kirill Kondratyev as well. So I'll see what I can do, and I will send some of that film clip. It's a short film clip of Putin giving a talk, at that climate conference, which was one last thing. Actually, you mentioned the book Nikolai, Ice, 1968, but the one in the mid-70s was Fire or Ice. You may have come across that one. That's when. Yeah, because until 74, they were saying it's an ice age. The caterpillars have more hair, or whatever. Armadillos are moving in the wrong direction. They use a lot of proxy data. But there was a book by a guy, I think it was named Fisher, and it was called Fire or Ice. And it was at that point that we started to flip over to it's warming, not cooling. So,
right.
Yeah, I did that flipping too with these two. Well, hold on here. I'll show you with the big screen. 1985, 1988.
Yeah.
And then, of course, in between, a human tragedy.
Yeah.
So, Nikolai, next steps. Where are you heading home soon? Where are you headed from here?
No. Next steps, I'm going to go and do some filming around the embassy, do some flyering around Madrid. I've got a meeting with lawyers and a potential eyewitness. And then I'm going off to Marseille to meet an old friend of Vladimir's, who an astrophysicist who has some very outrageous claims, which he's told me. And I'm very curious to go and listen to what he has to say. And it's going to be a very exciting meeting. And then we'll see what happens next. I'm just sort of I have to do it in sort of small chunks. I had meeting with producers and stuff, and let's sort of see. It's sort of like I've now dug in. I've done 3 years. I suspect I've got at least another 3 years to go. And I won't give up. The person that makes me want to work very hard is Olga, his daughter. She's absolutely the loveliest person ever. Maya Sistra, I'm here for her, and and it's and if I can bring her a bit of happiness, then I'm happy, and that's it.
Well, these are noble goals for a filmmaker, and thank you for all that you're trying to do. And
thank you for setting me up on this train.
Hey,
So
Jeff.
one last look here at that pile of video. There, by the way, there's the other Vladimir, little Vladimir, is right there on the left-hand side.
Vladimir Sergey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's around anymore.
Yeah.
And here's your flyering on the streets of Córdoba.
Yeah.
So thanks again to Mickey Glantz, University of Colorado, a great social scientist focused on climate risk and solutions, and who intersected all those years ago with Vladimir Aleksandrov, and Nikolai Golitsyn, filmmaker on a mission. This is Andy Revkin at the Columbia Climate School. Sustain What Enterprise, signing off. Please share this with friends and colleagues, and send it especially to people in Spain to see if they can jog some memories over there as well. And we'll just keep working at this story and come back and see what we can update folks with in some months ahead. Take care. Be well.